Hello, hello, the Joy of Football podcast with Martin Tyler, the greatest commentator in the world, and me, Neil Barnett, is 1 year old.
Can
This
you believe
episode,
it?
52 weeks. So, happy birthday to us. Enough of that. And we've only got 2 segments today because we're going to concentrate on giant kills. And, of course, we've got Martin's letter from the Gantry. Now, listen, don't forget, subscribe in order to support the podcast. Go on the Patreon to get more involved, and follow us as well on written form on substack.com. Get involved in all that. It's under the Joy of Football on Substack. Martin Tyler and Neil Barnett. Martin.
Neil, happy birthday.
The Joy of Football podcast. With me, Neil Barnett.
And with me, Martin Tyler.
Looks like Xavi! Rooney! Aguero!
The Joy of Football. So we start in the 1960s, and we're focusing in the 60s on the League Cup, which I don't know if people know, but it started around the beginning of that decade, but it was voluntary, and it was voluntary all the way up till 1966, and then everyone in the Football League, which of course included all the big clubs in those days because there was no Premier League, had to enter in 66-67 with the final at Wembley for the first time rather than over 2 legs. And I think
in those early years, Rotherham got to the final, didn't they? So in the early 1960s, when it was a very limited competition, but all credit to the Rotherham team of the day. They did the club proud. But it was something, I think Alan Hardaker, who was in charge of the Football League, wanted another competition. Of course, Europe had started, but it wasn't seen as a major distraction. Very few clubs actually qualified. So they wanted something to just boost the season and another knockout. It was controversial. I'm sure you remember.
It was,
that as well.
yeah.
Not everybody, as you say, not everybody wanted to join, but it produced some magical football towards the end of the decade, right to the final itself.
Well, it did, because in the 2 of the first 3 years that it was at Wembley, a 3rd division club, now League One status, won
there
it.
were 2-leg finals, weren't they?
Before that.
Yeah. So in 1967, the final was moved to Wembley for the first time, and it was perceived as an added attraction, and it clearly was. But the big fish didn't really enjoy the bigger pond, and for Queen's Park Rangers, who were in the 3rd tier of English football then, to get to the final and then go 2-0 down to Division 1 West Bromwich Albion.
West Bromwich Albion, who won the FA Cup the following season against Everton. So, I mean, they were a big club,
The story goes that the ownership of QPR, who was the owners were very different in those days. They were local business people, really, and Jim Gregory offered some incentives at half time when the team were 2-0 down, which way beyond. We're not that long after the abolition of the maximum wage, so it was a pretty decent incentive. This is, I have to say, not substantiated, but it's certainly, if it's a myth, it's an urban myth in that part of London. And they came out and they won 3-2.
And both them in 67 and Swindon beating Arsenal in 1969 unearthed an absolute star, a legend. In 67, it was Rodney Marsh who scored the equaliser to make it 2-2 when he dribbled through. I mean, he was the big name. Everybody was waiting to see Rodney Marsh, although I'd seen him at Fulham and I'd seen him actually at QPR as well. But he drifted through and scored an absolutely sublime goal to make it 2-2.
And Mark Lazarus completed the rise from the 2-0 dead with the winner, which of course the headline writers loved.
He was a right winger, Mark Lazarus.
He was, yes. And of course it was a winger for Swindon who stole all the headlines, and Don Rogers, very much one of their own. And that was played, if memory serves me right, when Wembley's surface was under real scrutiny. And they'd had Horse of the Year show on it around that time. There were lots of other events on it. And you could argue that it suited Swindon against Arsenal. But in fact, Don Rogers was capable of playing on any pitch at any time. He would have loved playing on a really good surface as well. And it was a massive game. Arsenal, I think, had they won it the year before, the interim year between those two.
Couldn't tell you. But Rodney Marsh
or
helped.
Leeds had won it, I think.
Rodney Marsh helped Queen's Park Rangers up to the top flight and thriving there, and then got a transfer to Manchester City, who were winning trophies galore at the time under Joe Mercer. I think Malcolm Allison had taken over by then. And Don Rogers got a transfer to Crystal Palace, who were the team of the 70s, as they were called early on.
Well, for Rodney Marsh, they went to Manchester City. Rodney's a great guy and has done a lot of broadcasting.
I've done a lot of broadcasting with him in America.
He's great fun, fantastic guy. Yeah. And unfortunately, he'd be the first to admit it. It was the wrong move for him, and it was the wrong move for Manchester City, who were on their way to winning the old First Division, the Championship, and they didn't win. And Rodney was unfairly blamed. He was one talent too many. It disrupted the shape and the chemistry of the team, really. But he was a flamboyant player. He did play for England. I'm not sure that he was a cup of tea of all the Alf Ramsey.
Alf Ramsey on his England debut actually said, "I want you to play like Jeff Hurst, and if you don't play like him, I'm warning you now. I'm pulling you off at half time." To which Rodney famously remarked, "God, we don't get that at Manchester City." In a rather salubrious.
He always had a one-liner, Rodney, for these situations.
Yeah.
But that was big news in the 60s, and you're right, the League Cup finals, which of course has been big news only just this month. So I'm glad it survived, because it is for the domestic. Particularly for the smaller clubs in the earlier rounds. And as I mentioned last week, AFC Wimbledon knocked out Ipswich and should have been at home to Newcastle. And then there's an amazing feat of, I don't know, what is it, geology, where you get a sinkhole and it was on the pitch and they ended up playing at St James's Park, and the rest is glory for Newcastle.
I think there was a famous image as well out of the Swindon-Arsenal final at the end of Arsenal's Bobby Gould crying at Wembley when they hadn't won it.
He scored the Arsenal goal, I think.
Oh, was that when he cried?
Well, he ran on on the track.
That's right.
I think there was a big celebration.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I don't think he won anything in his playing career, but of course he was manager of Wimbledon when they famously won the FA Cup against Liverpool.
Trump everything else, wouldn't it?
So Bobby Gould, top bloke. I want to bring out one personal one. Can I bring out a personal one?
Of course you can.
1961, Chelsea won Crewe Alexandra 2 in the third round of the FA Cup.
Yeah.
Jimmy Greaves still at Chelsea then. Frank Blunstone, who Chelsea had bought from Crewe in 1953, still going strong at 90, Frank, living in Nantwich, just north of Crewe. But Crewe was his home club, and he scored Chelsea's goal, but Crewe won 2-1. It was
that was
61, third round.
There was a famous Crewe game against Tottenham around that time where Spurs were in the double. It might have even been that season. Spurs won 13-2, and Crewe being a railway town, apparently they came by train and got off at platform 2 and left on platform 13 for the return journey, which was another. It might be apocryphal, but it's a great story.
Pick one of those games for your giant kill of the decade.
I think, remembering them both, I think it wasn't, QPR certainly wasn't on live television. I don't think Swindon was as well.
No, they were both highlights.
The highlights, I can remember people wanting to rush home to watch QPR.
Yeah.
So that's just a personal choice, really. I think Swindon did
as well,
extraordinarily well.
But it was the first League Cup final where everybody was in it.
And Don Rogers at Crystal Palace played in a big part, I think, in the game where Palace beat Manchester United 5-0. It might have been United's relegation season in the following decade. And he was a real carrier, a real West Country lad, and played with, like the two guys. They're the sort of players that we miss a little bit now because they didn't play necessarily to orders. The order might be just go and do your stuff, but do it in the right areas. And they certainly did most of the time, not all of the time. So they're sort of maverick kind of players, really, which I think the game could do with a bit of infiltration from that kind of temperament, that kind of talent. Not many now.
Okay, one game then. We move on to the 1970s, and it's really the FA Cup here that dominates. Famously, the Sunderland, then of the second division, against the mighty Leeds in the 1973 FA Cup final. Southampton of the second division over Manchester United in another cup final. And a couple of other games, Hereford versus Newcastle, non-league Hereford versus Newcastle, which brought John Motson his first really national recognition. And one of your favourites.
Well, Burnley were in the first division, were knocked out by Wimbledon, who Wimbledon then went on to draw at Elland Road.
Non-league Wimbledon.
Non-league Wimbledon, yes, against top division sides. Obviously, Leeds were a very special team at that time. I was at the two FA Cup finals you mentioned. I was there just as a spectator for Sunderland and Leeds. I just started my journalistic career and managed to get a ticket. And I was on the below the Royal Box, if you so really almost by the perimeter fence. And the Leeds were all, I think all the 11 were internationals, and Sunderland had some very good players, by the way. Jimmy Montgomery in goal, and Dave Watson, who went on to play so many times for England as a centre-back. Bobby Kerr, who was the captain. Vic Hallam played up front, powerful figure. Ian Porterfield, who later managed Chelsea and scored the winning goal. But the thing I remember most is there's a save, a double save from Jim Montgomery. And I, in the ground, didn't see it because the moment it was a goal. Peter Lorimer, I think it was, and that was going to be a goal, and sort of reality was going to wash out the romance of the day. And they all stood up in front of me. There weren't that many rows in front of me. They all stood up, so I didn't see anything. And then everyone was going, oh, wow. And I had to go home to see what a fantastic save. The double save was truly amazing. So that was. There are moments in football matches. You always say that the moment. The moment, of course, was the save and the goal from Ian Porterfield, and the great Leeds were beaten. And Southampton, I travelled on the team bus with them.
Can we just also recall Sunderland, Bob Stokoe, the manager, and his famous celebrations.
He ran to Jimmy Montgomery. And this is the story from behind the scenes on the day. I found out later on, because I joined ITV in the August of 1973. So, and they were still talking about the cup final, and the coverage that shows that shot is on ITV. The great Bob Gardam, to whom I owe my career, because he gave me my very first break recommended me as a commentator. He stayed, so he's saying to the camera, stay with Stokoe, and you see a cameraman going the opposite direction. Now both channels covered the cup final live, so I don't need to name the organisation that didn't get the shot, but it was Bob's day, Bob Stokoe's day, Bob Gardam's day. And it's just, it's a tremendous.
I got to know Bob Stokoe in the 1990s, end of the 1980s.
Did we say he was the manager? I don't know.
Because Ian Porterfield got him scouting for Chelsea, and just a wonderful, dry sense of humour. Very quiet and understated man. And
that's probably the most demonstrative he's been in his entire life, I would think. And of course, played for Newcastle, so and was a cup winner. In fact, memory serves me right. But the Southampton was special for me. I was allowed to be the reporter on their bus going to Wembley. There was a fair degree of optimism. But Manchester United weren't quite the Manchester United that they became, say, in the Fergie years.
No, they were more the Manchester United of now.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. I have to say that they...
Actually, to our producers, they were slightly better then than they are now.
And of course, Bobby Stokes got the goal. Mick Shannon was the pin-up boy who was playing for England then, I think, or certainly soon afterwards. I think he was playing for England then.
Another one who got transferred to Manchester City in order to improve them. Yeah,
and a lot of strong characters in the dressing room. Jim Steele, the centre back. Peter Rodrigues, right back, who was the captain, and. Yeah, I think
my mate,
that pocket
Aussie Peter Osgood,
Peter Osgood, of course, yeah,
who had left Chelsea after a row, as all the big players had in those days. Nothing much changes, and I remember McMenemy before the cup final saying, "I'm telling the players I want them to do what they always do. I don't want them to do something different. I don't want Aussie going on a 40-yard run." Even if it's in front of the royal box.
He was somebody who knew how to play to the crowd, Peter, wasn't he? He was a very, very talented footballer. Tall man, but with short legs. So he had a low centre of gravity, a lot of problems for tall players.
Brilliant feet.
Yeah, he was uniquely I've often looked at players these days. Is there anybody quite like that? Because it does give
Benzema
you the ability to twist and turn,
Yeah.
But
whereas Shannon was a galloper.
Yeah, well, he was a galloper. He's a galloper now. Provides gallopers, doesn't he? He's been a wonderful
horse trainer.
Yeah. And he used to say, when Laurie McMenemy, the manager, the successful manager in this case, had a go at him at half time, he go, "Laurie, this is only my hobby." What time's the racing on?
I went down to his stables and filmed there. Mick Shannon, and while we were down there, he was all calm and labour. He was another one, calm and labour. I mean, he was full of life, but he was a relaxed guy. And then all of a sudden, there was I can't remember if there was an emergency bell or someone just did a huge whistle, and there was an announcement that a horse had got loose. Which was returning to its stable. Well, he went from relaxed and everything else to full of joyous swear words, unjoyous swear words, I should say.
After expensive property.
Yeah, and until it was
upper crust,
until it was brought back under.
If you talked to him, and you obviously did away from the camera, he did like an expletive.
Yeah, he did.
And then he became a panelist, and we always wondered how he went through these shows without actually swearing.
I mean, he had a beautiful Hampshire accent. And it was just a wonderful burr. Yeah.
He came up with all sorts of phrases, one of which I've never forgotten, which is live every day as if it's your last and one day you'll be right.
He played a lot for England and he was a good footballer.
He was a very good footballer. But I think he just had that, not worrying about it too much, because he did love horse racing beyond belief and then made a very good second career. Probably now people, if they hear Mick Shannon, they hear the name, they think if they're into their racing, they'll know him for that and not even know he was a fine footballer.
Southampton have had some very good managers over the years. Obviously, Maurizio Pochettino, Ralph Hasenhüttl. But I think definitely that Laurie McMenemy would be seen as the king.
Yeah, I mean, he came at a difficult time. They got relegated and they were in... This, of course, was a year after my debut commentary. My first year was 74, 75, and then they got to the cup, and that's how I was lucky enough to be on the team bus as a reporter. But he brought them back up after they'd won the cup, so they were a second division team. That's something we haven't really stressed, that they were a second division team in the old structure, and then they got promoted after that. And he was very good in signing players who were supposedly over the hill, like Kevin Keegan, Alan Ball, people of that time.
And they were runners-up in the early 80s.
Yeah, they were
in the league
with that kind of with that kind of
Peter Shilton
experience. Yeah. So he could manage the star names. I think that's something that younger managers have to go through to show that they can do that. Can they control a strong dressing room? That must have been a really strong dressing room with those characters in it.
The other two, Hereford, Newcastle, and Burnley, Wimbledon.
Well, I was just getting my notes together coming out today, and I've got some team photos of when I was playing in the Commentators team, and I noticed Ricky George played in one of the games.
Oh, really?
Ricky George is the unmentioned hero of the Hereford-Newcastle game, because he didn't score the pile driver. It was Ronnie Radford that as you rightly said, really made Motti as a national figure, as a commentator. But Ricky actually got the winner. And
Scrappy goal.
It was.
And that was a mud bath, wasn't it?
Yes, it was a midweek game, wasn't it? And
replay. Was it a replay or a postponed game? I can't remember. Yeah,
it was certainly midweek, and it was But we're going to talk a little bit about Burnley and Wimbledon as well, because that was Wimbledon were on their way towards becoming what they became in the 80s, which was a Premier League team,
and cup winners
in the 90s, because the Premier League didn't start till then. But an FA Cup winners in 1988. And that was an amazing achievement. And one little memory of that is Dickie Guy was the goalkeeper. I think he's now president of AFC Wimbledon. He's certainly still about.
With a beard.
Yes, with a beard. And he made a penalty save from Peter Lorimer.
Brilliant. It was brilliant. I remember it still.
But Brian Moore, who I look back now with even more reverence than I was working beneath him, but alongside him, if you see what I mean. And he set up this shot for the opener of the big match on the Sunday afternoon. The game was playing on the Saturday, but it had been covered by ITV. And he got Dickie Guy to put his hands in front of the camera. And he said something along the lines of, the hands of the guy who made the headlines today, playing the play on words of the name. It was just, it was just brilliant television journalism. And they lost 1-0 in the replay. Against they having joined the leagues very, very narrow. But for all this, because of what's shown regularly, and because John Motson was very helpful to me early in my career, I'm going to pick Hereford Newcastle as the ultimate one of the 70s. The gap was ridiculous in terms of league positions.
Yeah, I'll go with you on that, even though Sunderland Leeds runs it close and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I'll go with you.
When you look at where those Sunderland players went to after that, so there was a lot of there was a lot of talent there, and it's sometimes when we look at
and it's just lovely that Newcastle were crap for so long when it came to winning trophies. It's lovely, and now we can celebrate that they're no longer that, and Tottenham are. Okay.
Yeah, that was a long-winded way to get that point in. Forget about the Newcastle stuff. All he wanted to say is that Tottenham are now on the list of, not top of the list of the teams that haven't won.
They're my second favourite club because we always beat them. Okay, let's move on. 1980s. We got some more FA Cup finals. Wimbledon over Liverpool, which if Aguero is your moment, and there's some people on the pitch, they think it's over. It is now. It's Kenneth Wolstenholme's moment. Then surely Motti's moment was the crazy gang have beaten the Culture Club at the end of Wimbledon, Liverpool. Yeah. Coventry, Tottenham, we shouldn't forget. Coventry, though, were a top flight team.
Yes,
but
I was on the.
It was their only trophy.
Tottenham were the favourites to win, and I was on the bus. David Pleat, who we've had on the Joy of Football, was the manager. But it was all a bit edgy. I remember looking back afterwards, because the shirts was a mess up, wasn't it? The advertising, some of the shirts didn't have the right advertising on, or there was complications around it from the Tottenham point of view. But Tottenham scored right at the beginning, and it looked as though it was going to be going to form. But it's the FA Cup, so and we've got a non-league team beating a top flight team, and it is Coventry who got beaten 2 years later. 2 years later, so there's no question that Sutton United. Where I'd played a few games in the Isthmian League probably 10 years earlier, the ground is still the same. It was actually, Sutton played Leeds United in the 60s. I think they lost maybe 6-0. But I was in a team, I think it might have been the Corinthian Casuals reserves. I was a bit more effective in the reserves than the first team. And we played there on the following Tuesday, and we were all going up, well, that's the peg that Alan Clark had. So I'm having that peg in the visitors' dressing room, and that was Mick Jones, that was Billy Bremner. We all played like kids. We were going, which one, where would they have put that shirt? And we won, as Leeds did.
I want to tell you a story about the 1970 Cup final when Chelsea beat Leeds. I was at school, And I want to tell this story because it just shows how the world has changed. The only way you could get tickets for the FA Cup final in those days as a supporter was to collect match day programme with a token on the back.
It wasn't the only way, Neil, but I know what you mean. It was the official way.
For the supporter.
Yeah.
For the every week supporter.
Yeah.
My sister got married in 1969 during the 69-70 season. And knowing that was going to happen, my dad and I bought 3 programmes to every home game. So when the FA Cup final came round, we got 3 tickets. And my mum came to her first cup final, to her first football match since my dad had taken her to Brentford in 1946-47, and she swore she'd never go to football again. And she fell in love with Charlie Cook and became became a follower for the rest of her life, going to every home game and to Crystal Palace home games when he was at Crystal Palace, Charlie. Somebody in my class at school who was a Chelsea supporter missed one game and missed one programme and only had 20 programmes out of the 21, 42 games in those years. And he didn't get a ticket for the cup final. Now, I'd been to a lot of cup finals in the 1960s because my dad could get tickets. I swore I would never go to another cup final after that happened unless Chelsea were in it. And the first cup final I went to that wasn't Chelsea was Wimbledon versus Liverpool, 1986.
1988.
Because 88, because I was working it, because I was doing Wimbledon Club Call, and oh my God, what a wonderful occasion that was. People remember it because one of the things they remember is that Liverpool's hard man Steve McMahon was taken out by Vinnie Jones with the most Neanderthal challenge imaginable, of which Vinny is rightly proud. But the fact is, I think most people think it was after about 2 minutes. I think it was about 20 minutes into the game. And just the whole game was like that. And it was very much a backs to the wall job by Wimbledon. But it was, I go on about people being played out of position, but what Don Howe, who was Bobby Gould's coach, did that day was just brilliant, because the best player in the league that season by a mile was John Barnes, Liverpool's left winger. And Don Howe switched the 2 Wimbledon wingers so that all season Alan Cork, an old-fashioned centre-forward whose legs had gone a bit, was playing up the right. And young whippersnapper Dennis Wise was playing on the left, and he switched them for that game. And Dennis Wise played on the right wing so he could help out with kicking John Barnes every time he went forward, which he did pretty successfully. And he was the free kick expert, Wise.
Yeah, but if Dave Besson hadn't saved the penalty, we don't know what would have happened. He did. Yeah, he did. And John Aldridge was a really good penalty taker as well.
It was a brilliant save.
It was one of the great Wembley, on any occasion, a penalty save to great.
And then Wise took the free kick from which Laurie Sanchez scored the only goal of the game. It was unbelievable. It was unbelievable.
I can remember.
Wimbledon had what was the capacity of their ground in those days? Plough Lane.
Yeah, it was just about in double figures, I think.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
they were like the Luton or the Bournemouth.
The nightclub in the ground as well, which rather suited the image in there as well. They were remarkably strong in their bodies and in their minds. And you're right, it was a tactical triumph as well. They were a non-league team when I was playing non-league football, and I can remember going down to the interview rooms afterwards. I'd come in with Liverpool. This was this period where I was so lucky to be on the bus. I've actually seen some footage of it in the last few days. I was interviewing Gary Gillespie, who had a plaster on his forehead because he'd been cut and he'd missed the final in '86, I think. And so he was going to play. But if he wasn't going to play, your pal Nigel Spackman was going to play. So on the bus, the footage I was shown, I interviewed Gary, and then this all went out live. And I walked down there.
He was going to play at the back. Spacker's playing midfield.
Yeah, but he was going to play in the back of Gary. Gary goes, and Nigel was sitting next to Alan Hansen, who. So I moved to the. It was a bit prearranged. I think we got to proper seats and everything. Nobody tried to trip us up, which can happen sometimes on these things. And then Alan Hansen spoke extremely well, as he went on to do for many years as a broadcaster. But he forgot he was having a testimonial game on the Monday, and I'd forgotten that. So obviously the testimonial was to parade the FA Cup, which of course they couldn't do.
Well, Alan Cork had his testimonial at Plough Lane on the Monday, and everyone was still drunk. I mean, it was just a brilliant night. Nobody had sobered up. No. It was just crazy gang. Perfect.
It was, but I still think I mean, it's a close one, this, but with my non-league hat on, I mean, Sutton beating Coventry had won the cup 2 years earlier in the third round. It was I wasn't in the country. It was weird. My son had just been born, so he'd be about 3 months, I suppose, and we decided to go away to Portugal. During which time, no, 89, he was born in 87, so he was 15 months, because on that trip he said his first word, which was map, which was there was a map in the apartment we were staying, and that was the first proper word of the language he spoke. Where Sutton were going on the map while we were away. And when I came back, I remember saying, I don't want to know, I'm going to watch all the football. It was really very unusual, maybe the only time I've ever been away during a football season. And so I felt very strange about it. I wanted to know what was going on. So I in the world of the early video recorder, so I set up all the things. And then we're coming back through on the Monday, and I'm just showing the passports. Then you had to show it, obviously, to the inspector. And a guy recognised me, and he went, "What about Sutton then?" And so I said, "Well, tell me. You better tell me now." So the manager, Barry Williams, was like, he quoted Shakespeare and things. He was a very school teacher type, and he should be remembered. He didn't stay as manager there very long after that, but it was a wonderful achievement. But Wimbledon, well, yeah, I expect you're going to go for Wimbledon, Liverpool. Yeah, I mean, I do think. And Motti summed it up so well. So we've got 2 mentions for Motti in the 70s and the 80s, haven't we?
Okay, we move on to the 1990s. And you, of course, have got your game in this.
Yeah, there's no argument about this one. Woking of the Isthmian League, not the National League or the Conference, it was called then, away to West Bromwich Albion, who were in the second division.
Sorry, can I just give you one other 1980s game that I just don't want to miss out?
Yes, you're just trying to stop me when I'm in full flow.
No, but it's because it all relates. Chelsea lost a replay at home to third division, now League One, Millwall, by 3-2 when we were in the top flight. The centre forward for Millwall was John Fashanu, who went on 3 years later to win the FA Cup at Wimbledon. And the manager of Millwall was George Graham, who as a result of that got the job of managing his old club Arsenal, and of course took them to so many trophies after that. But winning with small clubs in the FA Cup is a great path to getting to a big club.
Yeah, but you're to Millwall, and that's 2 divisions. I'm talking about the Isthmian,
right,
low down the pyramid.
Go on.
The second division team away, and going a goal down, and winning 4-2. Tim Bazaglo, who scored lots and lots of goals for Woking, but preferred cricket to football. Had a cricket score in terms of goals, but he now regards himself as I'm the bloke who got the hat-trick against West Brom, and nobody else mentions any other games that he's ever played in. And I have said to him, look, people talk to me about Aguero probably every week, and I'm really happy and proud that I'm part of that. So be proud of your hat-trick. Don't worry about being about one event in your career resonating around the world. And Tim's did. I also said to him, if your name wasn't Bazaglo, you wouldn't be remembered because it's such a name that you don't come across in any other context. And he's got 3 daughters.
Sounds Brazilian.
It's Gibraltarian, I think it is. Yeah, his dad played cricket for Gibraltar. I think Tim might have done as well, and Richard, his brother, who also played for Woking. But
if he hits a 6 in Gibraltar, does the ball go in the sea?
I'm not sure. There is a pitch there, isn't there?
I don't know.
Well,
There's a rock.
They're an international team now, aren't they? Danny Higginbotham, a friend of ours.
Yeah.
He played for Gibraltar. And other Gibraltarians around. Anyway, his daughter Olivia, one of his 3 daughters, is now a well-respected reporter for Premier League Productions, Chelsea TV, and various other freelance operations. She's very good. And she's got some of that. Dad, I wouldn't say was like a really driven sportsman. He was just very talented. But Olivia's really driven. And I say she must take after her mother.
Well, of course, also now an official in Gibraltar, although still living in England, is Ava Carneiro, the former Chelsea doctor who became renowned under Jose Mourinho. But
we're talking about West Brom v Woking, Neil. We've got to give it full due.
Yeah.
And there was an argument. I mean, if you watched the last podcast, you know all about it because you were there. So it was Jeff Chappell talking about it and the problems about they nearly called for the reserves because there was a dispute over bonuses. And anyway, they earned their bonus, and then they played Everton in the next round. That lost 1-0. And got applauded off by the Everton players.
So that's 2 games against top division sides. Was there anyone in that Woking team?
No, it wasn't. West Brom were in the 2nd division.
Oh, well, yeah. But was there anyone in that Woking team who was of that quality? Top 2 tiers of English football. Why did it happen?
Because the difference between non-league players and established players is the consistency. There are non-league players. Woking had a player in the early Jeff Chappell years called Mark Biggins, who I promise you could have on his day played for anybody. I'm including Brazil. I mean, he was just such a gifted footballer, but you never knew quite, and he never knew really when he was going to turn on the gold. But for moments, and that's why you do get upsets, because the full timers might have underestimated that. There was a feeling, I think, at Woking after that game that West Brom had underestimated them severely. And Terry Worsfold scored the other goal. So in the style of Ben and Jerry, Woking had Tim and Terry, which was and 4 goals. A great. There's a reunion for Jeff Chappell happening next week, and there'll be a few of the boys will be there. So I'll be telling them that at least on my side and my chair of the Joy of Football on this particular March day, the West Bromwich Albion v Woking won the 1990s, and to be honest with you, you're going to ask me to pick one at the end from the whole lot, and it's going to win that as well.
I'm gonna just come up with another game in the 1990s, which is the Champions League final. Marseille 1, AC Milan 0. I mean, AC Milan were all conquering at this stage. Serie A was the strongest league in the world by a mile. All the greatest players were there. This was the Milan of who had just not long beaten Barcelona 4-0 in the final. Having beaten, I think, Real Madrid 5-0 in the semi-final. I mean, this was just an astonishing team. And Marseille, am I right in saying, are the only French club to have won the European Cup Champions League? No one else has, have they?
PSG are having a go, aren't they?
Yeah, they are having a go.
Have been having a go for a while.
Yeah, but this was a Marseille. We didn't know how many good players they had then. But Basil Bowley got the goal.
It was played in Munich, the final.
Basil Bowley?
No, was the final played in Munich?
Oh, I see. I don't remember. But Marcel Desailly played, of course, for Marseille and got a transfer to Milan as a result. And Didier Deschamps played, I think he was the captain of Marseille, and he got a transfer to Juventus as a result.
Our very excellent young production team have reaffirmed that it was in Munich. But the reason I remember it is because I commentated on the game, I think, for Australian television, and it's my least favourite stadium. And that was one of the nights where it was the goal was put into the box and a set piece goal, and it was really hard to work out who got the final touch, and those things that people talk to you about, nice goal shouts, things like that, what all commentators really deep down remember and can't get rid of the feeling of, I didn't really know, I wasn't really sure, and that's one of the goals that I probably wouldn't like to hear it back again, put it like that. But and it was a surprise. But they did have a lot of good players. I mean, you operate at a different level to me, Neil. You've never been to a non-league game in your life, so
I have. I have.
Only working for Chelsea.
No. I went to in the 60s. I went to Kingstonian versus Barnet.
Did you?
And Kingstonian won.
Barnet named after you.
Well, Barnet only had one T. It was the thing on the top. And Kingstonian won 4-0. And I didn't know which side I was supporting all the way through because I lived in Richmond, so I was a bit confused. That was my first.
You never came to see us when we were coaching at Hampton and Richmond.
No,
did you, with your connections?
No. Well, I was at Chelsea every week.
Yeah.
But
Neil did interview me once when Chelsea, under Brendan Rodgers, sent a team for Alan Dowson's testimonial to Walton and Hersham. And
in a footballing context as opposed to a commentator context.
Yes. And Neil was already a legend, so I was very, very pleased that you showed some interest. And Brendan did wonderful favours because the game was washed out in July.
Yes, right.
And we found a Thursday night for it to happen again. And I think our season had already started. And Brendan brought the team back, which was really good of him. And we were winning 1-0 because it was a young Chelsea team. And because Alan Dowson was, whose testimony it was looking after, we had a Legends game before, and he was looking after all his mates. I was in the dugout, and I thought, we're in danger of winning here. And for all Brendan had done for us, the result didn't matter. It was but Scott Sinclair equalised in the last minute for Chelsea, and I saw Scott. I haven't seen him for a while now, but every time I saw him while he was still playing, maybe he's still playing, but anyway, a few years back, I would say, the most important goal you've ever scored in your career, it was the equaliser at Walton and Hersham for Chelsea.
You got a hat-trick in a playoff final, didn't he, for Swansea against Reading?
Yeah.
2 penalties.
Yeah. We digress.
I want to pick up one other name in that Marseille-Milan game, which is Rudi Voller, who played for Marseille, a much forgotten player probably over here in England, but he was Jurgen Klinsmann's strike partner in the 1990 World Cup in Italy for still then West Germany, and he
was a proper goal scorer.
Did he took the penalty, didn't he? That won the World Cup.
No, Andy Bremer took it.
Did it?
Yeah.
And Klinsmann won it, or
testing me now.
I can't. Voller might have won it.
Anyway, really,
it was a dive, whatever it was.
He went to play in Italy,
yeah,
and was very successful. I think played at Roma and 2 other clubs.
But he finished. It just proved what a good player he was when all he was famous for over here in England was diving, really. But he was a much.
You're talking about Klinsmann as well.
But both of them, yeah. Well, Klinsmann, of course, came over and did his swan dive celebration when he scored for Tottenham.
He's a very clever man, Jurgen Klinsmann, and that was the perfect way to take the mickey out of himself, to ingratiate himself into the English culture. Everybody loved him for having gone. If he had just got the decision and got up and played on as if it was a normal part of the game, he would not have been so revered, I think.
Yeah, a man who spent a lot of his post-playing career living in California, which is how he came to manage the USA.
Ring him, I got to know him quite well, and I got a message. I wanted to ask him about something, maybe the US national team or something. And he said, I'll be on highway, whatever it is, at this time of day. That's your time, 8 hours, this we work out of time. Call me. So I called him. There he was, Jurgen Klinsmann, driving up the highway and the freeway with probably the ocean on one side and, all the sun shining on the soft top of the car.
They were both good players. They weren't just...
I never really met Rudi Völler, but Jurgen...
Yeah, but he won the
everybody.
He won the Champions League there. So you go for West Brom Woking, I'll go for Marseille Milan. Right, let's go into this century and the 2000s. And my game here is one that you kind of poo-pooed when I suggested it, because it's Porto, who went on to win the Champions League. But when Porto drew at Manchester United with a last-minute equaliser,
knee sliding Jose.
Yeah, and won on. Did they win on away goals or win 2-1? I can't remember what the score was in Porto.
I think they won in Porto, didn't they?
But it was.
I was there, so I should remember.
It was amazing that Porto could beat Manchester United or draw at Old Trafford to knock Manchester United out of the Champions League. It was quite extraordinary.
We never got to see whether your Chelsea would have done anything in the final because they capitulated in Monaco, didn't they? Mm-hmm. And there's a little story about that. My son was playing in a team that trained on Thursday nights. And on the Wednesday, Chelsea had gone out of the Champions League. And on the Thursday, we were training about 5 o'clock or something. And as the training pitch in Cobham was right in the middle of the village, one of the boys came because I've just seen John Terry in the shopping precinct. And I said, "Oh look, I know John from work." I said, "Go and say, will he come over and speak to the lads, you know?" And so this lad went off and said, "Yeah, he'll be over in 5 minutes." I said, "Well, we won't start training. We'll just..." And John, very kind of him, Julie came over. And so he said some nice things to the boys about playing football and everything. And I said, "Well, John's, I have to go. Bless you for coming, John. Thank you very much. Any questions?" Yeah, I'm sure John had a couple of questions. And the boy put his hand up and said, "Can I ask one?" He said, "Yeah, go on then. Why were Chelsea such rubbish last night?" John, of course, saw the funny side of it, but I mean, it was still raw after that.
Yeah. Well, of course, the night before the game in Monaco, the rumours were rife. No, the night of the game. Sorry, the rumours were rife because Porto had played the night before, and Jose Mourinho was in Monaco, and we all believed, and it turned out to be true, on Roman Abramovich's boat ahead of signing for Chelsea at the end of that season.
Even before he'd won the Champions League,
yeah. And because he was already the bright young thing, and he became he was loathed across Europe, I think, for the way Porto played against Celtic in the UEFA Cup final in 2003, which was very, very cynical. Was it 3-2? I think Porto beat Celtic, but when they beat Manchester United, I mean, it was. We knew there was a new force of nature going, and Porto. I mean, they had Deco, who went on to play for Barcelona, and a number of top players in that side. Carvalho and Ferreira came to Chelsea. But there are a number of top players.
Did you not think, watching them dismantle Monaco, that Chelsea should have been playing in that final, and that did you even watch it, knowing your depth of feeling for the blue side of southwest London? I would have thought you would have found it hard to watch because Chelsea probably would have beaten.
I think I knew Jose was coming.
That was the trade-off, was it? Yeah, well, it worked out okay. Didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it was 3-0 in the final. Yeah. I mean, again, not at all the defensive Jose in the final. They tore Monaco apart. Didier Deschamps was the manager of Monaco, who, of course, I knew well. Yeah. And so I was probably supporting Monaco, actually, because of that. It was the arrival of a new force, not just Mourinho, but really, if you look back now, that was the last time that you can say there was giant killing in the final of the Champions League. There were out-of-form teams like Liverpool in 2005 and Chelsea in 2012 and 21 winning it.
And Tottenham to some extent.
They got to the final.
But in the final, they couldn't really raise a glove because Kane was 100%.
But I mean...
and they conceded a penalty in the first minute, didn't they?
That was the last real giant killing run to lifting the trophy. And although Porto aren't a small club, and I still think don't get recognition for being one of the best atmospheres in European football at their ground, I think that was the last time that a non-rich club won the Champions League.
I'll give you that one then.
Okay. The 2010s. I'm going to enjoy this. Birmingham Arsenal League Cup final 2011, the only major trophy Birmingham's ever won. Wigan Manchester City FA Cup final 2013, the only major trophy Wigan's ever won. I mean, two extraordinary results.
Absolutely. Obafemi Martins, I believe, only played a few minutes in the whole cup run and scored the goal that created this upset. Better known probably in England for his time at Newcastle. And again, it could be an urban myth or apocryphal, take your pick. The Arsenal printed T-shirts to celebrate the victory that never occurred.
We got our producer Michael, one of our producers today, is an Arsenal supporter.
Yeah.
You were crying. You were crying. I was in a Wembley box for that game with some extremely wealthy people drinking an awful lot of celebratory alcohol to Birmingham's victory. It was great fun. There were some Arsenal supporters in the box. It wasn't a good. So they printed
Cup winners, Carabao Cup winners, Carabao then, whatever it was then. T-shirts.
Yeah, well, I mean, you do that, don't you? But remember, Arsenal hadn't won anything since 2006. No, that was Liverpool. Since 2005 in the FA Cup, when they beat Manchester United on penalties. So you can shut up.
It was only 6 years, though. I mean,
yeah, but that's a long time when Manchester United and Chelsea are winning something almost every year.
Anyway, it definitely comes into the category. And just in passing, we did a podcast.
Birmingham got relegated that season.
They did, and now they're looking at. And I just want to reaffirm what a good season they're having. They're going to Wembley. It won't be such a big upset this time if they win in the EFL Trophy, and they're going to get back to the Championship. And the club looks like it's on a very successful pathway, and they appear in this as the killer of the giant, not the giant themselves, but they've had times, and there's big rivalry. It's a great rivalry. The Claret and Blue and the Blues in the city of Birmingham. It's something that doesn't, because they haven't played each other too often. But when they were playing each other, they were not all the events were particularly savoury, but the passion in the stadium. I don't think I've ever commentated on one.
Birmingham Villa,
unless they get drawn in the cup. That might not happen in my time, but it's special. It's special. It's a lovely city, Birmingham. I do, but it's got the real vibe for football, and it gets sort of, because of the northwest and London, it's bang in the middle, and it really should get an equal billing, I think.
Yeah. Can I just say, on the Stratford Road, which is the long Curry Mile, Curry 4 miles or 3 miles, that goes off the Ring Road all the way up to the M42, and part of it is called the Shirley Road, which I admire. Great name for a road. Is my favourite curry house called
ever.
Quite possibly called Channy's, that I always go to after.
There are more curry houses than in the league table for the new Champions League format for you to choose from. Which top of that list,
which is just a sublime curry house, and run by a Sikh guy who always wears his headgear and will cook anything. It's just
also,
wonderful.
I should mention that West Bromwich is somewhere near there as well, and they have a football team that didn't do very well in 1991. Yeah. But have done well since.
So Birmingham beat Arsenal, Wigan, Manchester City.
Yeah, I can still see Ben Watson at the near post heading it in. It was, they were relegated as well. You mentioned Birmingham. Wigan were relegated 3 days later. But as I say about Portsmouth and Wigan winning the cup, I think as a fan, I mean, Woking have won an amateur cup back at Wembley in '58 and 3 FA trophies in the '90s, and I've been up and down various leagues, but I wouldn't have swapped those days for constantly or even being in the Football League, to be honest with you, because they're days that we talk about football having moments, but matches are moments as well. In a season of non-league football, we play 60 games. To have one match is really seen as a moment. So I think for Wigan, it's been a pretty tough time in recent years as well. So that is there, and I saw Pablo Zabaleta on the bench for Albania.
At Wembley against England.
Wembley, nobody mentioned that he got sent off in the cup final. and that particular 2013, he obviously did the interviews as well. So that for me is, I know you're going to talk about a Chelsea game because we can't have a decade without a Chelsea game. So, but I banged on about Woking, so I do apologise. You definitely got mileage from Chelsea in this one.
Well, but I think, I mean, I always go back. Birmingham, managed by Alex McLeish, got relegated, and Aston Villa took him on as manager. Worst mistake Aston Villa ever made. You don't take on a Birmingham legend, but also Birmingham failure. And he didn't last long. Wigan got relegated, but Roberto Martinez got the Everton job, and David Moyes at the end of the season went to Manchester United. And winning the FA Cup with a small club will get you a big job. Or the League Cup will get you a big job. And I tell you that at the end of the USA World Cup, USA, Mexico, Canada World Cup in 2026, that the job will be offered to Eddie Howe if England haven't won it.
Oh, yeah. Well, but Eddie's great. The statue's being built, isn't it? Up in Newcastle now. Yeah. And he's absolutely, but he's a very different guy to Thomas Tuchel. So I have to wait and see what he inherits. And we'll discuss. I mean, there's a lot to talk about Thomas Tuchel, but we're recording this before the second game's played, so we need to make sure that we're up to speed.
Yeah, my Chelsea game in the 2010s, top of the Premier League, on the way to winning it in 2015. Bradford City came to Chelsea and won by 4-2. They're in the third tier at the time, League One now, probably League One then. And 2 former Chelsea Academy boys in the Bradford City team. And it was really, although Chelsea went on and won the league, it was also the beginning of the breakup of that setup. And Mourinho got sacked at the end of that 2015 year in November, having won the league, because that's just the way he was. But there aren't many occasions when the top of the Premier League team has been beaten by a lower league club. And
at home.
And that was one of them. And it was a caning. It was a real caning. So well done, Bradford City.
Bradford City is another very well-run football club at the moment. They've got bright ownership, bright management, and I worked for Yorkshire Television for 5 years, and then after that they were in. I remember them getting promoted from the fourth division, but then of course to be part of the Premier League setup is an amazing thing for a smallish club to do, having had the awful tragedy on their history page as well. So it's always nice to hear that wasn't just a one-off. It was a one-off in terms of giant killing, but the club has built on. And that's a few years ago now, but they looked to me like,
I think was Paul Jewell the manager when they got into the Premier League.
Yes, yeah.
I think he was there that day.
Does his son work for Chelsea? He works for somebody.
I think Sam Jewell. Yeah, he has his joined there as a scout. Well, and wasn't Terry Yorath manager of Bradford? Isn't that way he made his name as a manager? And of course, it's the father of Gabby Logan.
And Gabby was in the ground when the fire happened. And that's obviously a terrible experience to go through. I want to tell you one thing about Sam Jewell. When Bradford City were in the Premier League, Paul was very helpful to the media and the commentators. And we were doing a game in the afternoon, and he said, "Look, don't phone me up. I'm going to watch Sam play under 12s or something like that." He gave me the address, so I got down and we're chatting about, well, what's the team going to be today? And he's watching his boy play, and he went and he got a phone call, and the goalkeeper had pulled out. And I think it was the game that Neville Southall played at a ripe old age. I came in and I couldn't believe that I was hearing this. It would have been a sensation to hear it. I know an hour before the kickoff and the teams were announced, but it actually unfolded before my ears, so to speak. I was hearing the conversation. And I always thought, Sam Jewell was responsible for that, because if he hadn't been playing, I wouldn't have been there. So I haven't seen him on his journey, and I would very much like to see him, because obviously he's inherited a lot of football nous from his.
He was a good football man, Paul Jewell. He managed, was it Derby for a while or something? In the top flight, he did well. Mm-hmm. Yeah. We come on to the 2020s, and we've gone for one game. Or one team, 2 games really, but again, top of the Premier League being beaten by a lower league team, and in this case, the top of the Premier League was away, but the lower league team was bottom of their league. Plymouth versus Liverpool.
After knocking out Brentford away, and a turbulent time for the club, but obviously Wayne Rooney had given his best shot and it hadn't worked out. And there was no way that Brentford at home. I know it's changed a bit since then, but Brentford it would have ruined a few accumulators. That's all I can say. And Plymouth found a mojo that they didn't think they had, and the Liverpool game was very good. I did the game at Manchester City in the next round after they'd knocked out those 2 Premier League teams, and they went at goal in front. Yeah. So that was, here we are. It's a commentator's phrase, they're at it again, aren't they? We hear a lot of.
I mean, the thing about a club like Plymouth, they're not going to fly anywhere. They haven't got that kind of money. So down there in the southwest, I mean, the city of Plymouth is right up against Cornwall. It's just over the river from Cornwall. It's the most out of the way. I mean, it makes Norwich look positively in the middle of the country.
Accessible.
Yeah, and it's just so far to go.
But the opposition have to travel. We made this point a few weeks ago. The opposition have to travel to get there. So
they do. But if it's somebody like Liverpool, they'll fly.
Yeah, but there's an airport at Plymouth, isn't there? I mean, they do fly.
I don't think Plymouth would fly to away games, would they?
Oh, they might do sometimes. I mean, but they might leave at 10 o'clock on a Friday morning for a 3 o'clock Saturday fixture at the other end of the country. And they've been doing. I did Dagenham and Redbridge versus Plymouth. Paul Sturrock was manager of Plymouth. It was a replay. And they travelled up. So travelled up from Plymouth. They didn't stay overnight. And they slept in the bus. I think not far away from the ground. That was their rest period. And obviously it was a luxury bus, but they slept in the bus. And our producers will probably look it up for me, but I have a feeling Dagenham won 3-0. and the distance, the club was probably not in a great shape financially. Paul Sturrock was a very good football manager, a fine player and an experienced manager, and he couldn't find a way round. He would have loved to have brought them up, and lots of hotels near Dagenham and Redbridge. in the city where the teams that come and play West Ham stay, and they were nowhere near able to afford that. So but I think now, I don't know, there's a whole thing about whether we should be flying at all, and some of the Premier League might fly a 17-minute plane journey from one airport to another in the course of pre-match preparation. I'm not sure that we should support that, really. But if you're a Plymouth player, you have to buy into that, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, Plymouth's never been a big club, and it
semi-final, Watford 1984. Watford beat them 1-0. George Riley, tall. And they lost to Everton in the final. Andy Gray. Steve Sherwood, the goalkeeper.
George Riley and Luther Blissett up front.
Yeah. Morris Johnson as well. He played in that team, didn't he?
And a young winger called John Barnes.
Yes. It was. And that was Graham Taylor's Watford, but that was Plymouth. And that was, I think, the furthest. In my prep for the Man City game, I think that was the furthest that they got. But Michael, our Arsenal supporting producer, is just checking whether Dagenham and Redbridge ever beat.
You say 84?
No, it was. It might have been more recently than that, I think. When Paul Stewart, you look at when Paul Stewart was manager of Plymouth.
And any other team playing green in England, like Plymouth?
No, there's a few in Scotland.
Yeah, but I can't think of anyone in England.
And it became a very trendy second strip, third strip. I remember.
Well, because goalkeepers always wore green, so
yes. And there was a time where the laws of the game said that there was only certain colours goalkeepers could wear, wasn't there? And now, of course, it's everything. All the colours.
Well, there was a long period where you had to wear the same colour shorts and socks as the rest of the team as a goalkeeper. Because that was brought in the 1960s or 70s, I can't remember.
Well, then they changed it because when goalkeepers go up for corners or come out, or more importantly, coming out for crosses, the referee needs to be able to look at their socks to identify. Yeah. It's an extra identification.
Well done, Plymouth. You're in the vanguard to be remembered for the 2020s.
They've embroidered this season, improbably. The battle to stay in the Championship goes on.
Yeah. That is one game. And the only other...
Come on, before we finish, you pick your one. You know what?
Oh, one of the whole lot.
Of the whole lot, you pick your one. And I must say, there are lots and lots of games that people will be going, well, what about this one? What about, I did... Halifax knocking out Manchester City in the 70s, Halifax knocking out West Bromwich Albion when they were in the Championship, and both occasions, I think non-league Halifax, but anyway, lower division Halifax. So there are lots of games that we haven't put in, but we could fill the next year of podcasts on giant killing, because happily it's part of our culture.
I'm going to go Wimbledon, Liverpool. I am because it was 1988. I'm not quite sure when they got into the Football League, but it wasn't that long before. It was in the 1970s. So
they were definitely in the Football League in 1981, because I did my last game for Granada Television was Bury versus Wimbledon in the 4th division, where Bury were trying to get up. It was the day David Pleat danced in the white trainers on the pitch at Manchester City,
when Luton
Road, when Luton stayed up. So Wimbledon may have just joined it. They were in the 4th tier then. So they'd gone from the 4th tier, I could tell you that, in 81 to the Cup winners in 88.
Yeah.
Yeah?
2002, 2003. Yeah, 2002.
It was 2-0, yeah.
2-0.
That's
2002,
Dagenham.
2003.
Yeah, as long as Michael's got the right game.
Dagenham and Redbridge 2.
Plymouth 0.
Plymouth 0, yeah.
Scorers?
I'm not sure on that one.
No. Okay, we're going to move on. And the only other thing we got today is Martin Tyler's letter from the Gantry.
Letter from the Gantry.
Thanks, Neil. With giant killing very much on the agenda for today's Joy of Football, time I thought for a look back at some of the more difficult and at times downright scary temporary commentary positions needed at grounds where television coverage was rarely expected and certainly not catered for. One that immediately springs to mind occurred in an FA Cup upset in 2000-2001 edition of the tournament. It involved a club that no longer exists under that name and took place in a stadium which has disappeared too. The then conference team, now National League, was called Nuneaton Borough. After massive problems, it is Nuneaton Town now, and they're in the Midland League, Tier 10. They ground sure they've had absolute bucket loads of problems. The giant killing took place at Manor Park, which was demolished in 2008 and is now a housing estate. It was the borough's home ground for 88 years. I grieve for the fans, but not for that Gantry, temporary as it was, on November the 21st in the year 2000. This was a first-round FA Cup replay against Stoke City, then languishing in the third tier of English football. The original tie in the Potteries had finished goalless. The teams moved south, some 45 miles as the crow flies, for the replay, and it was goalless again until the 4th minute of added time. Mark McGregor then won the game and the acclaim for the non-league team. The match was played in pouring rain, which is where the problem arose. My position was on scaffolding reached by a long ladder with no break points between the gantry and the ground. Getting onto the ladder after the game in sodden clothing, needed a leg over a rail high enough to put balance into question. Putting a foot down on the right rung was tricky in the extreme. At the same time, grasping higher parts of the equipment with both hands was like grabbing bars of soap. Any fall would have been fatal. The match had emphasised the magic of the cup. It was a broadcaster's dream. The logistics that evening, though, were a nightmare. But the longest it's ever taken me to return to pitch level after a game was in Malta at the Ta Ali Stadium in 1989. The Republic of Ireland were on the World Cup trail under England's World Cup winner, Jack Charlton. They went on to reach the quarter-finals, you'll remember, of Italia 90. The stadium was only 8 years old and felt somewhat unfinished. Reaching the commentary position involved a stride over a gap of about a metre between what was actually structurally two halves of the stadium, a gap which stretched right from the top to ground level, a drop, I would guess, of about 100 feet. However, no real problem in the pre-match daylight. All went well on the pitch for our purposes. The Republic won 2-0, making absolutely sure of qualification, both goals from John Aldridge. Then came the problem. Apart from at ground level, all the lights were switched off. Suddenly the gap and the potential drop became a massive challenge. You just could not see how long your stride had to be to avoid a fall which would mean oblivion. Some of my colleagues chanced it, all successfully, thank goodness. But I wasn't confident, and I dithered and I fretted. The longer I waited, the more uncertain I became. No one had a light. Mobile phones with their torches were a decade away. It was truly terrifying. Eventually, I took one giant step for one member of mankind and survived. For many of my early years, several English grounds had iron ladders bolted to one end of the structure of a stand, so you had a sheer climb to gantry level. Elland Road and Nottingham City Ground come to mind. At Fratton Park, the embarkation point was in the middle of the main stand and looked appropriately enough like a ladder acquired from the Navy. The ascent had circular rings round it, which made it even harder in winter when one's girth was padded out by thermals and big coats. At Blackburn, for a while, pre-Premier League, you had to negotiate a staircase outside Ewood Park. The sight of an uncertain commentator on the climb often produced some jeering from fans below in the main street. One of my predecessors, on a frosty day, had a panic attack and for a while was frozen to the spot. While Goodison Park will be rightly missed for a multitude of reasons, the clambering over the roof of a stand to drop down into the gantry won't be. I'm sure the comparative journey at the new Everton Stadium will be less hazardous. It is generally much safer now, so much safer, because television needs are factored into a ground's design. Health and safety checks are now the norm. But in the old days, reaching gantries by climbing on slippery ladders, edging down tiny passages and ducking under iron railings, often a pre-game assault course, was part of the fun. We were members of the pioneering generation of football on television. Actually reaching your position was often achievement in itself, and you were as pumped up for the kickoff as the players. The target always was to have the best possible vantage point for a commentary, and a right old battle to reach it made you that much more grateful for the privilege.
Yeah. It's changed so much, and health and safety does come into it, I'm sure. But I can remember in 1988 going to Hull for the first time and having to climb a ladder to get
old Boothry Park.
Having to climb a ladder to get into the press box up there. It was horrible. And
people could whiplash the ladder if it was one ladder. People at the bottom would think they're holding it steady for you, but they'd actually be whipping out when you're halfway up it and you're sort of hanging on for,
it was awful.
For your life.
And it was an awful night. It was an evening game. Chelsea lost 3-0. I was doing club call, and I came back down, and I was I went round to the dressing room area. There was no press facilities in those days for interviews, and Darren Wood came out of the dressing room and told me that the players were striking and not talking to the media because they'd been relegated and they were not being offered bonuses for promotion or something. Oh God, all this way and I'm not going to get anything. All the players came out, refused to talk. And then the manager came out, Bobby Campbell. They'd lost 3-0 and he just used it as an excuse. No, I'm in league with the players. I'm supporting them. I'm not talking to you either. So I put my microphone away and left without anything. 3-0. Terrible night. But Hull's a great place to go now. Their stadium.
There was the equivalent in my job is doing the commentary, but it not being recorded properly. And I did a game at Barnsley at Oakwell against Rochdale in the old, I presume the old 4th Division for Yorkshire Television. And I think Rochdale scored 3. I don't know whether it was 0-3, 1-3 or 2-3, but all the goals were in the second half. And the first half commentary was recorded properly, but the second half wasn't. Oh. And in that game, I'm pretty sure this 2 of the Rochdale 3 goals were scored by Terry Owen, the father of Michael.
Oh, right.
Yeah, and as Michael became famous, I was able to say to him, I commentated on your dad scoring these goals at Barnsley. So I said, what are we going to do? And they said, you'll have to stay up overnight. I go home on the Saturday and play for the Commentators team on the Sunday. It was part of the weekend ritual, really. So I had to stay up and dub it again the following morning, and then they edited it and went out in the afternoon. And so goodness knows what it sounded like, because we didn't even have the actual effects. Nothing had recorded. Sometimes if you've got the effects of the game, you can almost transport yourself back to doing it as if it was live. But those days happily are very, very...
The 2 worst occasions I remember when I was commentating on Codcore, Bournemouth away in a League Cup tie in the late 1980s. I got given a room behind the goal, not behind the goal, but towards the corner flag, behind the goal line, and there was a pillar in front of me, and I had to do commentary from there. I mean, I couldn't see a thing. I think Alan Dickens got the only goal of the game. West Ham. 1986 team when they came third, the highest ever position.
So remember we did the letter from the Gantry, all the ex-West Ham players who go, and I've been back again since I wrote that, and Alan was there again.
Yeah, and the other one was 1994. Chelsea got into the European Cup Winners' Cup because Manchester United won the double and had beaten us in the league, in the FA Cup final. And in those days, everything didn't revert to the league, so the runners-up got into the European Cup Winners' Cup. And the first game was against a team from Prague called Viktoria Žižkov. And because of the reputation of Chelsea's not-so-cuddly supporters, they wouldn't have the game in Prague, and they moved the game to a place called Jablanec on the border with Poland. So I remember we got a coach up from Prague to Jablanec, and I've got photographs somewhere outside the stadium of all these riot police in protective headgear with rifles out and
Your
everything.
reputation had gone before you.
It obviously had, yeah. So I get into the ground, I get into the press box, and I'm sitting in the front row of the press box, and there's this flipping great pillar in front of me. And the game kicks off, and as the game kicks off, a copper in his riot gear comes and he's not got his headgear on now, comes and stands against the pillar in front of me. So I've got 2 double intrusions that I can't see around. And I tapped this guy on the shoulder and he wouldn't move. He just ignored me and he wouldn't move. But I had a camera with me. So I got the camera out, stood up and made it clear I was taking a photograph of him, which I did. And I published it in the matchday programme.
And he moved.
He moved then. Yeah, he moved then. But I mean, these were the kind of things that you had to deal with in those days.
Goodness me, we've been remembering these things for a year now. How about that? If you've watched all of them, thank you so much. If you've watched one of them, thank you so much. And I hope you'll watch the next one because we're still having a lot of fun with it. And I hope you are too.
Year 2 starts next week. From Martin and me.
See ya.
Tra. I enjoyed that. Listen, don't forget the Patreon, Substack, subscribe. Yeah? And I managed to get through that without mentioning Chelsea defeats against Scarborough, against Scunthorpe. Oh, God. Life's been a torture, really.